activist, filmmaker, musician, and all around hell of a human being, our friend Derrick Broze. What's up, brother? How's it going?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? How's it going, Slim?
Hey, Derek, good to see you.
I don't know if you
Hey,
two have
bud.
ever had the opportunity to meet each other or not, Derek, but Slim is on
We met briefly in person in Houston.
Yes,
Actually, he spoke at
yes,
the Houston Bitcoin group, and I went up and said hi to him because he spoke at some of the Exit and Build Land summits with John here in Texas. So we
yes.
crossed paths briefly, but I don't know if you remember that, Slim. But I came over and just said hello to
No,
you at one of the Bitcoin
I
events.
remember that exactly. That was right before I think I flew off to Australia, and that was it February of last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was sometime around then. Yeah.
Right around there. Yes, I went out there with who was I with? I was with Parker Lewis. We drove from Austin to Houston. I believe that's when we came out there. But I definitely
Well, good.
remember meeting you in person, Derek. It's good to see
Good to
you.
see you again, man. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
heard you're about to dip out, but thanks for sticking around a little bit.
yeah. I've got a couple minutes for sure. So not to
uh,
rush.
well, before we get into why Derek's here, then maybe before Slim takes off, um, Derek, you've done a ton of work through Freedom Cells and along with the Live Free program, and in your own right down on the property in Mexico to connect people to the seed or the source of their seed, to get people in meat space working together and talking together. And I don't know, dude, it's just it would be cool to see a couple of future collaborations down the road with the two of you, especially since you both are there in Texas. What's your travel schedule like this summer, Derek? What are you just staying put and writing all for the next few months?
I'm I'm here in Texas in Houston, the Houston area right now till pretty much the end of this month, and then I'll be headed back to Mexico, and I'll be there pretty much till the fall because our big goal this year is to start building our on our land. I'm here with my partner Miriam, and we're visiting family and taking care of some things in Houston because I'm born and raised from Houston, so I still have like activist connections. I'm hosting a show next week. I'm always when we come to town, we're always trying to do something to bring the community together, whether that's music or a meetup or potluck or something along those lines. So I'm here in town and taking care of some different things. Doing some of my journalism out here. And I went to the Libertarian Convention while I was in Texas and just visiting different places. But for the most part, our focus this year is definitely to spend more of our time on our land. We got the land last year. We've got our core group of people. We're going to be adding a few more households later on in the year, and yeah, the goal is if everything goes well, that we'll be in a position to start building, adding more to what's already there. But with all the beautiful fruit trees of bananas and avocados and limes and pears that are already there waiting for us.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Well, when you need carpenters, call me.
Absolutely.
Well, Derek, it's funny because I've been doing some talks with some people in Mexico. So, here in a couple weeks or a month, I think you and I should probably wrap back around and kind of share some
Sure.
stories.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I've been wanting to get into Mexico for a while. We've had some ranchers and stuff contact us. It just really wasn't into the timing wasn't there yet. But I see now with the elections that have happened, there's going to be a lot of things happening in Mexico right now. And so I'm getting a lot of energy directed towards the beef initiative right now from Mexico. So it'd be good to
Yeah, I
do
mean,
some collaboration.
I can definitely say that because you guys may be aware. I mean, during COVID, when we first moved to Mexico, March 2020, and we started the Freedom Cell Network, started growing in Mexico, and just a lot of movement, of course, like Canadians and folks in the UK and Australians who wanted to get away from tyranny came to Mexico for the most part. And a lot of those people are people who are like occasionally will pop in a Freedom Cell group and say, hey, does anybody know where I can get some clean local beef or, things like that? Or does anybody know a butcher who doesn't, use hormones? And so there definitely are people, both Mexicans and expats who've moved to Mexicans who are interested in those types of things. So I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity for you.
Yeah, there really is, and it's my responsibility to kind of put it to perspective. It's like, hey, you can have people think you have to be big. You don't have to be big. The smaller usually is the better, especially getting started foundationally. And that's where that's how it grows up from there. It doesn't grow in any other direction. So the conversations are fantastic whenever you do have people that have maybe just are now starting into this type of regenerative ag. It's good that you might not have a lot of experience. It's good that you're not too big. It's good that you don't have a lot of overhead. It's good that you have the opportunity to engineer your own inputs. It's good not to have to leverage yourself into debt to basically do regenerative ag. It's good whenever you don't have to worry about basically the industrial food complex. Tons of opportunity for people, like you said, expats, people that are native to Mexico. Mexico is going to be a player now in a lot of ways that a lot of people don't understand. And I think COVID really reflected that a lot of people could rely on going to Mexico and they don't want to leave. And there's a story to be told. Mexico is a fascinating country, and I've been all over Mexico myself throughout my years. And there's something there for everybody that basically has that window of opportunity to facilitate, just like you are. So it's a good conversation to have.
Hell yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
Slim, we'll let you get out of here, my friend. But thank you so much
You bet,
for
guys.
coming through, and we'll see you next week, week after, something like that. I definitely want to get some updates from you on the fire, recovery process, on
Yes.
what happened with your grass seeding ventures and stuff like that. And
Well, I'll
yeah,
be out
just
there Saturday. We're gonna have a big there's a summer camp that's been going on for 16 years. It's called Kicking Bear, and it's on the 4F basically ranch. And they're not, everything got wiped, totally eliminated. And they had like hundreds and hundreds of crossbows, all kinds of stuff that got incinerated. But we got it all replaced, and the camp is moving forward. So I'll have some good content and footage from that summer camp from Saturday. So we'll talk about it next week.
heck yeah,
So.
brother.
All right, guys. Y'all have a
That's
wonderful
cool.
show, and then good to see you, Derek. We'll see you
Good to see
guys
you.
in a week. Y'all be good.
All right, brother. You take care. And do you
All
guys
right.
make sure beefinitiative.com, beefnews.com, cattleman'sfeast.com, all that kind of stuff. Go there, check it out. If you're going to be in Nashville towards the end of July, go through and see Slim. Get fed, even if you're not participating in the Bitcoin conference.
Yes, sir. And share those links. Share, share, share. That's the best thing you can do for us. Let's get viral, guys. People are waking up. So y'all be good. We'll talk to you soon.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Take care, Slim.
Is that the Nashville Bitcoin conference he's talking about?
Yeah, he's throwing a giant cattleman's feast there. I guess we just had the information up, but
I was just told that I should go there. I mean, I went to this consensus one in Texas last week or two when I confronted RFK about Zionism. It's a super mainstream crypto conference. Like they had freaking IRS agents there and Secret Service agents talking about regulation. But I did an interview while I was there with Peter McCormick of the What Bitcoin Did podcast, and he recommended for me to go there to meet some more people who get the message. So maybe I'll check that out if there's going to be friends there.
yeah, and I mean, there's the half the T Lab crew is like right around there, and there's a whole bunch of other people in the space. Scott Armstrong's there in Nashville, and it should be a good time. It should be a good time. I would much rather just haul ass and move down to Mexico, but
Come visit, man. Come visit. At least
Well,
come down during the Greater Reset or the People's Reset in January when we have our next one. It's always a good time because that's like people from all over the world, parties, music, gatherings, good people. It's, if you're going to come, might as well come whenever there's going to be 400 other people to hang out with.
hell yeah. That's yeah. I mean, I wouldn't ordinarily go to Pueblo, Colorado, but because we're throwing an event there next month, I'm telling everybody to come there.
Yeah, exactly.
Should be a blast. Um, Shit, man. Let's just hop into it because this whole thing has me. The work that you've been doing on Bethany Christian Services has been truly, it's been kick ass, and also kind of like I get a weird feeling in my gut while I'm reading it. I told you and I told these guys I was adopted through Bethany Christian Services in Indiana in 1978, and I went to a Bethany Christian hosted daycare and pre-kindergarten, stuff like that. And then I went from, the Bethany Christian pre-K, like basically directly into the GATE program. And so that in and of itself is kind of wild. And seeing what you've uncovered and how truly shady that organization appears to be and capable of being, it's kind of wild. It kind of is. It's kind of like watching your own MK Ultra-ing unwind in front of you.
Do you know anything about your adoption? Like, I mean, I don't want to get too personal. I don't know how much you've already shared before publicly, but do you know anything about like your birth parents situation or how the adoption came to be? Have you been
The
able to find anything
story
about
that
that?
I've heard way, 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 way later in life, I mean, I didn't find out shit for the first 35 years of my life. The story that I've been told is that my birth mother was a like foreign college student, Southern Indiana, got knocked up likely by one of her professors, had a very religious background, got referred to Bethany Christian Services, and I wound up in getting adopted out of Indianapolis, Indiana.
Wow. Have you been able to verify any of that, or is that
Sealed
just as far as you
adoption
know?
records, I would have to have a legitimate medical reason to want to track down my birth parents so that we could at least observe their medical history. Or there's a couple of other things you can sue for information about your birth parents, but I don't have lawyer money.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was told by one of the parents that one of the I guess solutions that was offered to them once they were like, "Hey, I'm getting cut out of my child's life. They're not letting me communicate with them as I was promised as part of this so-called open adoption." That they were told, "Well, you can go register on, I can't remember what they're specifically called, maybe you know, but like just registration sites or something. And I guess it's a resource. Maybe it's run by the government. I don't know. I didn't look into it too deep, but like a place that basically where when children who've been adopted, I guess, are looking for their parents, they can go try to search and say like, oh, here's somebody registered as in, a parent who relinquished their parental rights at this same year and time and place that I was adopted. This might be my parent, things like that. But I don't know how accurate those are, or if like, if all parents choose to do that. Obviously it's a voluntary thing. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I
crazy,
mean,
man. As soon as you told me you were adopted through this, I was like, all right, I definitely got to pursue this, just because now it's like made it a little even more personal. It was already kind of like I had a reader. I don't know if I shared this with you, but I had a reader reach out to me, and they've been trying to get me to focus on this for probably, I want to say, over a year, I admit, but it took a little while because, as you know, the world is crazy and there's a lot going on. And this isn't one of the big headline stories that people hear about, but I do believe it's an important one. And the more I've gotten into it, I'm two articles deep into my series now. There's at least going to be a third one, maybe a fourth, and everything I'm learning definitely just it doesn't look good. Now, that's not to say, of course, that your adoption or others who adopted through Bethany and similar groups weren't on the up and up. I'm sure there are some that work out the way they're intended to, but as I'm learning, there's also some adoptions that their mothers just have been lied to, manipulated, coerced, thinly veiled threats, things like that, in order to make the adoption happen.
well, there was in the second article, I have the first one queued up, that we can go through, but in the second article, one of the stories that you touch on sounded very similar to the one that I heard about my own birth mom, and the college student, pretty, conservative Christian university. I don't think that in my case it was a Christian university. The story that I heard was IU. So, honestly, if anybody wants to go look through like faculty fucking yearbooks from the late 70s and see if there's anyone that looks like me,
See if
it,
find a professor who looks just like you or something.
I've got really
That might
fucking
work.
strong genetics though, man. Like my oldest son looks fucking exactly like me.
I saw that,
And
dude. Congratulations. I saw he graduated, by the way.
cheers,
He
man.
did.
Yeah.
I noticed. I was like, dang, he looks just like him.
It's yeah, nobody's going to confuse paternity on that one. And even my youngest, there's moments, it's a profile and stuff like that, and changed expressions and stuff that'll definitely be a carbon copy. So it's possible. It's possible if anybody's really that curious to go through, you know, faculty yearbooks. But yeah,
Well, can I give a little background maybe for those who are listening? I
please
know we
do.
kind of just jumped in. For anybody who doesn't know what the heck we're talking about here, I'll just share a little bit. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, I had a reader reach out to me and say, "Hey, look, this is something you need to look into." And they were actually somebody who was directly impacted by Bethany Christian Services. It was a family who had a pretty horrible experience. They're not going on the record yet. They've just been giving me background information. Because actually, one of the things I realized is that plenty of the mothers who've dealt with Bethany are kind of afraid to be sued because they have sued parents before for just sharing their stories out loud, just saying things out loud and kind of calling them out for the problems that they've experienced. But Bethany Christian Services has been around for about 80 years and based in Michigan and then the Indiana area. And then they have some chapters other places, and they have international chapters as well in a few countries still existing. But as the name implies, they consider themselves to be a Christian organization. Their full mission statement says that they demonstrate the love and compassion of Jesus Christ by protecting children, empowering youth, and strengthening families through quality social services. And that's kind of the public face of them. And in my first article that you're referencing there, Steve, we look at the history of them. I also look, just for those who might not have heard, but there is this connection with the DeVos family. Of course, Betsy DeVos was well known during Trump's administration. She was the Secretary of Education, but their entire family is a kind of Christian evangelist, philanthropist. There's her parents, I can't remember the names, but the Elder DeVos Foundation. Each of them have their own DeVos Foundation named
Isn't
after
there
themselves.
an Amway connection too?
I mean, there's still threads there that I haven't fully pulled that I think, maybe for future ones, like, because there's also, for those who don't know, Betsy DeVos, she married into the family. And her brother, though, is Eric Prince, who's, of course, the Blackwater Founder Academy now is what it's called. And one of the big angles about this whole thing is the Christian angle, because, just as a background, Prince, he has described himself as like a warrior for Christ, fighting the war on terror to go out there and, that sort of thing. But then you've got these rich Christian evangelists who obviously are anti-abortion, and whatever your opinion on abortion, that's their angle. And the way that they play it is like, okay, well, we're going to fund organizations that promote adoption as an alternative to abortion, which again, that sounds like a potential positive, okay, baby still can be born and find it a good Christian home and some nice, and better life than it would have had. That's like the most ideal scenario. Maybe yours worked out that way, maybe others have, but there are other families who have come forward and in those years who've said, actually, I was kind of coerced, I was manipulated. A lot of the women who are now grown adults, when they were younger, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, in that range, some of them got pregnant unexpectedly in domestic abuse situations, non-supportive families, like the Christian families who are like, we're going to cut you off if you have this baby. All sort of trauma that the mothers were already dealing with and really lacking support systems for the most part. And then they go to a hospital and maybe they mention the potential for getting an abortion, or they, the hospital asks if they would be open to adoption. They get some pamphlets, and before you know it, they get connected to a group like Bethany Christian Services. And a little more background, I don't think I put this in the first article, but I also found that Bethany has been, this is 4, 5, 6 years ago, Bethany was found to be using a company that was using geolocation with cell phones. So if a woman was going to abortion clinic or any kind of clinic where they could get more information, Bethany would do targeted ads to those phones to women who had visited those clinics based on their geolocation data, and then start sending them ads about adoption and things like that, which, okay, it's probably a less insidious than some of the NSA stuff's doing, but it's still, I would say, an invasion of privacy. It just shows people another way that corporations and groups like this use your data that people just give out and don't even think about. That data is then used to target you. And so it's not like it's kind of happening through this natural process. The hospitals and organizations have contracts with Bethany Christian Services. A mother asks some questions, they get connected to BCS that way, or they get targeted ads based on their cell phone location data, and they might not even have any idea that that's how they came into the whole fold. And then you can get into the fact that Bethany had and I believe still does have contracts with the U.S. government to rehome or temporarily home immigrant children, refugees, etc. And there's at least one Tennessee representative that I found, and I quoted in the first article, that has accused Bethany of being involved in human trafficking because some of the children were being brought in late at night under really shady circumstances. And I don't think the full story of that has ever been explored. That, like I said, there's a lot of these different threads that the more I got into looking into Bethany, I could see like you probably need a full team of people picking at some of these different angles because, like you said, the Amway stuff, this human trafficking angle. And I just want to make it clear because nobody wants to sue me. I'm not saying Bethany Christian Services has trafficked anyone, but they have been accused of that by people, and that's just a fact of the matter. So they yeah, as you pulled up there, they tie into Trump's zero tolerance immigration policy, and this has continued under the Biden administration. It wasn't just during Trump. They're still separating families, despite what Biden says. As far as I can find, it's still happening. And so when a parent and a child come across the border, and that does happen. I know everybody thinks it's all military age men, but there still are parents and kids trying to come across, and they get separated. The parent might get deported for illegally crossing or get shipped to some other part of the country. The kid gets put into some services like Bethany Christian Services and then put into what's supposed to be temporary foster homes where they claim that they're going to connect the families eventually. But again, when you dig into this situation, and this isn't just Bethany's fault, it's I think a fault of this larger industry. If imagine you're an immigrant parent, you try to cross to get away from some destructive, crazy situation back home. You get caught, they separate you from your child, which must be horrifying. They might deport you. Now think about what kind of legal rights or options are you going to have available to you, especially if you're somebody coming from poverty, to try to contact the U.S. government and say, hey, where's my child? Can you make sure I get them back? Meanwhile, they're in Bethany Christian Services or they're being held in some foster homes. They promise that they reunite the kids, but there's really no accountability here. There's no, I couldn't find anything other than their word where the government's actually tracking what happens to those kids and if they do make it home. So, there's just so many different pieces besides where I focus on my second article, which is about the mother's experience themselves.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to get into a little bit of that too, because look, I don't have any qualms talking about any of this from my own perspective. I'm 46 years old. Am I going to be upset about being adopted? Like that's not how it is. But I had decent parents. So it was like they wanted to have kids and couldn't. And because my grandfather was relatively high up in the Church of God, and because my grandmother was part of like the women of the Church of God kind of thing, I'm sure that's where the Bethany Christian connection came out of, because the Bethany Christian pre-K was ran out of the church that I grew up in. It was part of that building complex. So
And you said you went into the GATE program?
Yeah, like almost directly when I got into elementary school.
Steve, who was that? I'm not familiar with them, but somebody tagged them, or maybe you tagged them on Twitter the other day, and they were saying, like, whenever you posted about it, they were saying, "Oh, check out this woman; she's done work on this." And you said like you tried to contact her and haven't heard anything back.
Yeah, the Emmapreneur is what her handle is. Her name's Emma.
Does she focus on this too?
Heavily, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I need to look into her work then.
And I think, and she's been trying to like needle all of the big accounts and stuff like that. And we were just trying to have a conversation with her because she's got an extensive body of knowledge on this, and I wanted her to share it with these guys. And she seemed to be pretty focused on only talking to the blue check accounts, but that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for collaboration.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what she had there, and I'm just curious, man, for like I guess a personal question. Like you said, I've kind of feel this way with my childhood. You get to a certain point, you grow up, you accept the good and the bad, and you're like, all right, I am what I am because of whatever happened, right? Do you think it would impact you, or you would want to know, like, if you found if there was some different truth about like your parents' story, your birth mother's story? That basically if the Bethany version of events that your parents were told and that you were told wasn't true, would you want to know at this point, or do you think like it wouldn't help your life in any way?
I mean, it's not gonna hurt it either.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can go freaking unring that bell. You know what I mean? And if it was an
Yeah.
unfortunate or traumatic or coercive situation that led to the adoption, it doesn't in any way, shape, or form change the childhood that I had. It may
Sure.
explain some of the ways that I reacted to a handful of situations. It may help underscore like the, anti-authoritarian streak or something like that I have, but what am I gonna do? Feel bad? Oh, and somebody's
Yeah.
gonna care about that? Okay, I'll get right
Yeah.
on that, you know? No,
Yeah, it's like those situations are unfortunately like, I guess it's, I don't want to say too late, but I guess in a way, life has happened, things have gone on. But I feel like if, like let's imagine that it was the case, and not wishing it is, I hope that everything was above board and that this is
right.
a case of, hey, an actual adoption through Bethany Christian Services where a family adopted somebody and it turned out great. And like you said, you feel like you had a good childhood. I hope that that is the reality of the situation. If it wasn't, and for those who did adopt through Bethany Christian Services and who were told lies, like actually in the first article, I cover a story of I think I included it. I might not have actually included it, but I found one adoption, at least one adoption, and it was Eastern European, I believe, where or maybe it was an African nation, because as you know, they go to Africa, they go to the poor, quote unquote, third world developing nations, and Bethany like must have scouts or something, because they will literally go out and find families. And there's at least a few examples I've found that are in documented records where they go out, they find like a Russian baby or Eastern European
Mhm,
or African or something. They find some family. The family might be there. There might be mom, dad, everybody in the family, but they're living a life like their middle class lifestyle is a low class American lifestyle. So this is where I think some of the colonialist kind of mindset comes in, where they're like, oh, well, look, we can improve this child's life if we get them adopted by a good Christian white family in America or something like that, right? And
mhm,
I found at least a couple examples where the parents were told false stories, like your child's going to go to a school they're going to learn English and they're going to be able to have better opportunities, but they're going to come back at some point. They never come back. The child is sort of unaware of what's going on. The adoptive parents are told a false story, told that like, well, the parents all died in an accident or they're all drug addicts or something like that. So that's the thing, is like in the worst case scenarios, it's not only the birth parents who are being screwed over and misled, but it's the adoptive parents who may be coming in with all the best intentions and desires to really create, a nice family, who are being given false information. And the one you're showing there, that's the Harshalls. That was one of the examples I found where they went, and I think in that case, it was like a Russian baby. And his name was Roman. They specifically asked, because of their, I guess, financial and just their choices, to have a child who had basically a moderate health, health outlook, not somebody who was going to have a lot of problems. And
mhm,
Bethany repeatedly lied to them and told them like, yeah, this baby's good. He's been reviewed by a number of doctors. The parents, the potential adoptive parents, go visit him in Russia, and they could tell right away, like, something's not right. Like, this baby he doesn't seem like he's that healthy. And they're like, oh, he's just got a little bit of pneumonia, no big deal, right? And then they go through with the adoption, and as soon as they adopt him, within like weeks, they can tell like he had just development problems. He wasn't progressing. And then once they pushed and pushed, eventually all of a sudden Bethany's like, oh, we found this 20-page report in Russian and an English translation that says that his mom actually had fetal alcohol, and this whole thing that they just completely lied to these parents about. And the parents brought a case, and that's why I was able to find some of these situations, because even though some of the parents are afraid to speak out, as I show in the first article, you can find Yelp reviews, you can find reviews on Complaints Board and other websites, but most of them are anonymous, because some parents are afraid that they will be sued for speaking out, because they've heard the horror stories of other parents who, again, you're talking about parents who chose to give up their children, not necessarily because they wanted to, but because they either felt like they just didn't have the financial resources, they had no financial support. And on that point, I'll just mention one other thing. I interviewed a journalist. Her name's Catherine Joyce last week. People can find this at theconsciousresistance.com. She wrote a book called Child Catchers, and it's all about this. It's like called The Gospel of Adoption, and how there is this Christian angle coming in, and there's a lot of powerful, rich, right-wing evangelical Christians funding the adoption industry because of this, because they see this as superior, like get them on good Christian homes. And some of the research that she's found shows that in some cases, these parents who do end up relinquishing their parental rights, again, often under duress and stress and coercion, that they were, like many people, in positions where they were just maybe $500 to $1,000 short of being able to take care of the baby. Like if they had a little bit of a support system, they wouldn't have had to put the child up for adoption. And the reason I bring that point up is because Bethany will then use those things against the parents. So let's say a mom starts having conversations with Bethany about, okay, I'm considering adoption. They start showing them pictures of potential adoptive parents. And then the mom starts expressing doubt. And this is what I was told directly. I think it was by Jennifer in my article. And if once they express doubt, then Bethany will start kind of subtly threatening them and saying, well, look, it would be a shame if somebody called CPS and let them know that you're, pretty broke and you don't really have family support and all this stuff. So at that point, they've kind of already hooked them in, even though the parent hasn't agreed to do anything yet. But they're starting to put the fear of God in them of like, oh my God, my baby's going to get locked in the foster care system and CPS. And we all know horrible things can happen there. And so when you hear that Bethany is kind of subtly threatening, coercing mothers to go through with this. And at the same time, the data is showing that if these parents had just a little bit of support, they could have made it through and then make ends meet. That's disturbing to me, because how many parents out there do keep their babies and maybe they live a lower, they're in the lower tax bracket or the lower middle class. And that is the lifestyle I grew up in. Sometimes you go without certain things that you might like. Sometimes you don't get a toy, sometimes, but you still survive. You still got the love of your parents. You got a secure home and things like that. Right. So it's just unfortunate that in these situations, a little bit of lack of financial money, money coming in and threats from Bethany Christian Services cause some of these mothers to make a choice that they later regret very, very deeply.
And then you can also prey on the, no pun intended, but the religious angle of all of it as well. There seems to be, at least reading through it, multiple different ways that they can lean on a birth mother and place it in a religious context in order to help nudge her in the direction of adoption. And the whole thing seems unnecessarily creepy, I guess, at best. Like the most innocent way that you can explain it is it's just aggressively, creepy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best. If we give them the benefit of the doubt, then you have, let's say, a few select employees scattered throughout the decades who seem to be very aggressive, pushy, and completely just ignoring the mother's wants and needs. I want to make sure, Steve, as we go a little further, I want to mention a few of the mother's stories if I can, just because that is, of course, why I did this story specifically, but that's the reason why I cover any of this stuff. We've talked about my work on Utah in the past and the finders. None of these stories are fun, but I do these types of stories not only because people, reach out to me and inform me about these problems, but because these mothers in this specific case, they haven't had much of a voice. One of the mothers I spoke to chose to come out completely. She's put her name out there. Her name is Charity, and I linked to her TikTok channel. She runs a TikTok channel called the Bitter Birth Mom Club. And another woman, Jennifer, she's using her first name only, but not coming out all the way. And then Mickey is a pseudonym for another mother. So I kind of have different mothers at different levels of, I guess you could say, security, where some feel a little more safe coming out, some don't. But if I could just for a moment, I'd like to share a little more of their specific stories, because their stories, I think, that really matter. Okay, so as you said, like there is Charity's story is the one where she grew up in kind of a conservative Christian home. And it's actually, that it's a whole nother thread, but it's related to this organization called the Institute of Basic Life Principles, which has been referred to as a cult by some. And they're actually the subject of a 2023 Amazon documentary called Shiny Happy People, which relates to this other family, the Duggars. And like, there's a lot there. So she came out of that, and she was taught that her whole main goal in life is, of course, to get married and have lots and lots of kids. She says that she suffered emotional and psychological abuse during her childhood. And so when she had the opportunity to leave at the age of 19, she chose to leave and go join the Job Corps and just get away from all that. And then she ends up meeting in 1997 a man that was about 8-9 years older than her, 27-year-old man who also said he was religious, and she believed he had the same values and goals, or at least very similar. So they struck up a relationship, they get married. And then she said within 6 months of the relationship, he starts becoming emotionally abusive. And then once he finds out that she's pregnant, he becomes physically abusive. And so she starts pretty quickly planning like her escape and like, what am I going to do? I can't stay here with my baby once we have them. I need to have a plan. So she essentially just ran away after she has the baby, 1 month after the baby's born. And she ends up homeless for a while. She's on the street. She's living in a shelter. She gets a job and eventually gets a place to live. And she gets a restraining and a stalking order against her ex because he's starting to show up at her workplaces. He's getting her fired from jobs, threatening her. He actually eventually breaks into her apartment and he is arrested. He's charged with attempted murder and child endangerment, which is pretty crazy. So he goes to prison. And then after that, she's back in the shelter. She's on the streets again. Eventually, though, she tells me the story that one day the CPS officers arrived with police and they took her son into custody. They just took him right out of the shelter she was in. Now, some would argue, okay, well, of course, she's homeless. She's bouncing around. This isn't the best place for a kid. But by all accounts, she was doing everything she could with the resources she had to try to still take care of her son and keep him safe and do what she could as good as she could. Well, he ends up going to a facility run by another organization called DA Blodgett, which I do plan to investigate later in the future because I think there's probably something there. They partner with groups like Bethany Christian Services. So eventually through DA Blodgett, she gets connected to Bethany. And this is when they start encouraging her to consider adoption as an option for her son. And she told me stories like one time she goes to visit her son while he's being held at a facility at DA Blodgett, and she notices like he's got blood running down his nose, like a sinus infection, just stuff he just doesn't look like he's being taken care of. And so she expressed this and she says like, can I take my son to the doctor? Like I'll bring him back later, but he really needs help. And she told me they accused her of being mentally unstable. Because she was asking to take him to a doctor. So there's like this gaslighting going on. There's just all the promises that they seem to make about open adoption, which is that you'll be a part of the child's life. You'll get to receive letters and updates and pictures. There'll be visits and things like this. They seem to not keep those promises. And if they do keep them at all, it's not to the fullest extent that they promised the moms. Like they also promise that they will provide therapy for them if they need therapy, because a lot of these moms, as you can imagine, are dealing with trauma, not to mention the postpartum depression of the baby being taken from them or, leaving them, but just in general, all the trauma they've dealt with. And listen to this, man, I don't even know how this is a thing, but this was one of the craziest things to me about this. So as the baby's going to DA Blodgett, eventually she gets the parents to agree, her mom to agree to take the baby. And so they do what they call kinship care. So a parent or a family member is able to take the child temporarily, which to me, it's like, if she's got a parent willing to take the baby, why are they even looking for an adoptee? Why not keep them in the family? Because the data does show if you can keep families together, except for, of course, if there's abuse going on at home, for the most part, people end up better mentally, more stable, things like that, instead of being moved around and all this kind of stuff that can lead to a lot of instability in their lives. But while the husband is in prison for attempted murder and for child endangerment, he actually petitioned the family court for visitation rights, and he was able to get the child moved back from Illinois, where it was with the grandmother, back to Michigan to be in this institution with DA Blodgett. So, I mean, Charity couldn't explain to me, like, she had no idea how that was legal or how he would even have any right to claim to parental rights after he tried to kill the mom and, stalking them and all this stuff. But somehow he was able to find a lawyer to finagle the system to grant him, like, hey, my baby needs to be closer to me so that I can visit him if I eventually get out of prison for child endangerment and attempted murder. So that alone to me is just like, how does that happen? Right. And her story goes on, but eventually the baby is put into foster adoption care through Bethany Christian Services. And she said that she believed like that she was doing what was right, but she also told me, quote, "It was one of the worst days of my life." And she said that later on she was told by a charity worker in Michigan after she got pregnant with her second son, and she went and told them about what happened with her situation. And they told her pretty much right away that, like, what happened was criminal, that Bethany shouldn't have been able to take her child in the way that they did. And again, the way that they approached these mothers, one of the other mothers told me she was still heavily sedated from drugs after having the birth because she was forced to take a C-section. And then they come and show up to her. Not only are some of these women often under 18 or 21 years old, yeah, they're adults legally, but they're not really fully understanding the situation and They don't have any support system. So I don't think that we can say that it's a fair situation. Anyways, Charity, once the adoption takes place, it's, as I said, she doesn't get any kind of communication. She contacts Bethany to get a mailing address. They told her, well, they can't give her the mailing address. She asks if she could send pictures or letters. They say, yeah, we'll put it in this filing cabinet, but it's not going anywhere. She waited another month. She asked if she could get the address again. She's told the family doesn't want to have any contact. And what she told me was, quote, I felt like I was in the twilight zone. I still feel like I'm in a twilight zone talking about it. I did the thing they told me to do. And now I want to interact with my son. I wanted my son to be able to have those things, the letters and the pictures. But she has had no contact with her son since then. As I mentioned, a couple of years ago, she met some other mothers through TikTok, because this is one thing I've come to realize, man, is that this is kind of another subgenre, if you will, in the broader search for truth. Like there's a page run by two twin sisters who were Korean twin sisters who were adopted through the whole Korean version of this in the international scene. They run a page called Adoption Truth. A lot of these mothers are starting to find each other through Instagram and through TikTok. And that's what happened with Charity. She got connected to other mothers. They start sharing their stories. They realize like, oh, I'm not the only one that's happening. And she told me, quote, some of our stories are very different, but Bethany at the end of the day is the one that gained financially from what happened to all of us. And they are never going to come to account for that. Bethany is never going to be held accountable for making us strangers to our children. And it's so disgusting because they really think us, the birth parents, are not important to our children. And yeah, so that's a little bit about Charity's story.
I mean, it's hectic, and when you hear stuff like this, and it's happened to you, the thing that you want to do is try to contextualize it or something like that. And I can easily see situations where Bethany Christian Services would be able to emotionally manipulate these young women, where they can, coerce or use multiple forms of leverage to get them to give up their kids. But not only that, to completely go around the kinship program type thing, where the line of hope you're giving the birth mother is, yeah, you're going to be able to be a part of your kid's life until you give up the kid, and they're like, oh well, we kind of made that part up.
Yeah, it seems like something to that effect. And I mean, you know me, Steve, like I'm as far away from like we need government to regulate this as possible. And I still say that, not thinking government regulation is the answer, but there definitely needs to be more people paying attention to these industries somehow. I'm not sure what the mechanism is, what the proper way. I don't have that solution. I will be exploring solutions in coming articles, because thankfully, as I mentioned, these women are finding each other, and now they're forming organizations. They're trying to form groups to make sure that potential mothers who are going to relinquish their parental rights know their full rights. They know that, hey, you have this amount of time. Like different states and different areas give you sort of like a grace or probationary period where you have within like 30 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, depending on the area, to change your mind. A lot of parents aren't told that. They're not told that they can just turn around and say, hey, actually, we want to, I'm still in my grace period. I would like to get my rights back. They're never told that by Bethany. And in one of the stories I was told, actually, when they did try to do that, they were basically told to go get a lawyer. And again, if you're already in a situation where you don't got a lot of money and you're just trying to make ends meet, and they're like, oh, go get a lawyer, sue us in court. I mean, that doesn't sound very Christian, for one, but also it's just like, how what is a family supposed to do? And I'd like to share another story, because this one is this is about Mickey. This one, we actually have court documents that do show Bethany found in the wrong. Now, this wasn't a criminal case. It's not even a civil case. It's a citation, a complaint investigation within the California Department of Health Services, but it's still on the public record showing that Bethany did some wrong here. And it's exactly what you're talking about, where they completely ignore that there's a family member available, and they just say, sue us if you want to do something about it. So Mickey, she actually had a really, and this is common, these women tend to have traumatic childhoods growing up. She suffered physical and emotional abuse. She ended up being emancipated at the age of 16, and she had her birth mother murdered at the age of 18. So a lot happened to her in her first 20 years of life. And in 1990, she's 21 years old. She ends up dating an Indian man from her neighborhood that she met and started to spend time with. They get together, and she later finds out that he actually has a wife and 6 or 7 kids back in India. And this is after she finds out she was pregnant by him, and he starts trying to pressure to have an abortion. And basically he's just pressuring. She knows he's got this family, and she starts to go into hiding. He goes to India, he comes back, he starts stalking her, continues to pressure her to get an abortion. So by 91, she's got no family support. Her ex-boyfriend is, stalking her. She's trying to get away from him. So she eventually goes to see a counselor, and that counselor is the one that connects her to Bethany Christian Services in Chino, California. So she meets with the director of Bethany, and I'll just say this. We know the name of this director. I've chosen not to put her name out there yet. I'm trying to get in touch with her. I don't want anybody sending death threats to this woman. She's an elderly woman now at this point, but I do think she absolutely played a role in pressuring this woman and to participate in this. And I don't know how she could be held accountable, but at the very least, we need her to go on the record. So I'm still working on that. But so Mickey met with the director of Bethany Christian Services in Chino, and she starts getting shown pictures of families. These are the people that can, adopt your kid if you do this. Since her child was going to have an Indian father, she wanted a biracial couple that might make, at least look somewhat similar to the child's complexion and the father's complexion. But Bethany ignored this, and they found a white couple. And Mickey told me she didn't like the couple. Like right away, she just had bad feelings. And she said it was because of her upbringing of being abused. She says she has, she considers herself an empath. She has a sense for, detecting other creepy people. And she got those vibes right away, which unfortunately were later confirmed. But Bethany Christian Services ignored this. They ignored her cries for like, hey, I'd like a different parent. And at this point, what's important to recommend or to understand is that the adoption hasn't been agreed to because the baby hasn't come into the world yet, right? So this is just all talk. But already Bethany's showing that they're ignoring what she wants. And they're like, no, we're not going to follow your recommendation for a potential family. This is the family we're focusing on. And this is when, as I said earlier, CPS gets brought up, and this director essentially threatens her and said, well, it'd be a shame if somebody called the CPS to let them know you don't have a proper home for this child. Wouldn't that be bad for you? So the couple's just aggressively pursuing this. She says she's not ready to sign the papers for adoption. So they say, how about foster care? We'll put him in foster care while you continue to look for solutions. She does that, puts him in foster care. Eventually she does sign the papers. She told me she started sinking into like heavy drinking, postpartum depression. She told me, quote, I couldn't deal with losing my kid. I heard nothing from Bethany from that point on. And she said she wasn't given any of the counseling they promised. And then this is where the father does come back into the picture after the child is 3 months old, and he learns like, oh, you actually had the baby, but you put it up for adoption, which was very much not something that his culture was supportive of. And so he tries to make an effort to get the child back. And this is where, as I mentioned, Bethany tells him like, well, you need to get an attorney. And they didn't have the ability to do that. So the baby stayed with the adoptive parents, and the father wasn't allowed to get the child back. And this is also where Mickey made the point that, as we were talking about a moment ago, with kinship care and things like that, Bethany should have made an effort. They're legally required to make an effort to see if there is another family member available for the child, because you want to keep them in the family if possible. And they did not do that. They, in fact, told her, Mickey, to act as if the ex-husband or the ex-boyfriend, whatever, didn't exist. Just like keep him out of the picture. Don't mention him, because then that would mean this adoptive couple wouldn't have got the child, and it probably would have stayed within the family. And Mickey says, quote, they prey on people who don't have support, people who have dysfunctional families. They prey on women who are in very weak positions. I was completely lied to. My whole adoption was fraudulent. And so just fast forward a little bit, things start not happening well. She doesn't really get much communication. But as the child gets older, she did communicate with them, and she learned of several incidents of physical and emotional abuse from the adoptive father, including a fractured arm. And I can just say, from the journalistic side, I saw the text messages myself where the child was talking about so-and-so dad broke my arm and we had to go to the hospital and this and that. So I can confirm that's, those myself. Now, after that, as I said, in the years since then, eventually in 2019, her case ends up as part of this complaint investigation against Bethany Christian Services. This was, I found a copy of it from December 2019. It's called the Community Care Licensing Regional Office. That's part of the California Department of Social Services. They received a complaint involving two cases. One of them was Mickey, and one of them is another parent. And they're referred to in this document as reference 7 and reference number 8. And the investigation, they did confidential interviews of 4 different members of Bethany's staff. They reviewed 2 different adoptive family files and 2 files from relinquishing parents. And as I said, one of these relates to Mickey, and it says, quote, the investigation revealed that reference number 8, who was 17 years old at the time, and redacted, were relinquished in 1991 and was being treated by a psychologist and had been prescribed medication due to mental health issues because of the murder of number 8's mother. So that's referring to Mickey. Now, the reason this is important is because according to law, like when there's adoption going on, these are factors they're supposed to consider. Is the parent undergoing psychiatric therapy or treatment? And are they being treated by, psychotropic drugs, different things like that? That is supposed to factor into the decision. This investigation also says that, quote, there was no record from Bethany referring to reference number 8 to a licensed physician or a clinical psychologist for an evaluation, which is what they're supposed to do, to make sure that they understand the content, the nature, and the effect of signing the relinquishment. So then the investigation concluded that a preponderance of evidence has been met and that the complaint against Bethany was substantiated. And they have a plan of correction that said they, require the relinquishing parent to receive references for mental health providers, and then Bethany will speak to the mental health provider. But what's important to note is that this isn't a court of law. There's no financial penalty. As far as I can tell, there really was no penalty other than like this document says, the evidence shows Bethany did wrong. There's no enforcement mechanism. So we have no idea if this was ever followed, if these types of things are still happening. And Mickey told me I was on Social Security disability. They were supposed to contact my psychiatrist. They never did. They bypassed everything that they were supposed to do. And Bethany actually appealed this decision 2 times in January and March 2021, and both of those appeals were denied. And Mickey told me, quote, they determined because of what I was diagnosed with that I didn't have the mental capacity at the time to consent to knowing what this meant for the rest of my life. And she said again, the grief that I've had to live with has definitely affected me in every way. I do blame them 100% for this. I think if I had never crossed paths with Bethany, I would not have experienced the physical and mental problems that I'm facing now. It just never goes away. So that is, at least we have some documentation that they have not followed the rules at the very least, right? And I would say probably broken the law. But if you search Bethany Christian Services, you don't find much reporting on this. There's Catherine Joyce and a few others who are kind of focused on this industry. I'm trying to add what I can to it. And now we have these mothers who are willing, and I'm so grateful they trusted me enough to share their stories with me. And, I'm listening to these women shed tears and cry to me about their story. And the best I can do is say, I hear you. I'm listening. This is why I'm writing about this. This is why I'm doing interviews. This is why I'm making the time to talk about this, because more people need to know. And I'm actually grateful to share it with you, man, because I think this adds another layer to the story, because you were adopted through them. You have a different story, but still, I think that just shows people how pervasive this industry really is.
Yeah. And it did any different set of parents, it could have gone a very different way. Like I've talked about it when my dad was fucking kick ass. It did. He was a great dude, and I got hella lucky as far as that goes, because I know that there are shit show adoptions, and I know that there are horrific things that come out of it. It's a multi-billion-dollar legalized trafficking industry. That's human trafficking. It's just it's sanctioned. And we've decided that we're comfortable with this kind of human trafficking because you want to assume the best out of it. Okay, a potential couple who can't have kids of their own wants to put up money so they can do that, and you want to assume the best out of that. But the reality is, somebody who comes out of that environment with a decent childhood is probably the exception to the rule. And the direct gate programming and MK Ultra-esque type shit that happened through that that happened, at least to me growing up. I don't know if there's a direct connection between Bethany Christian Adoptive Services and programs like that, but it would not surprise me to find out that there was overlap at some point, especially at the level of director. Remember that what was Betsy DeVos in Trump's
Yep.
administration? She was the Secretary of Education.
Yeah, there's
So
definitely some big connections there. I want to learn more about that GATE program, man, and dig further into that.
yeah, you know what? I really need to like sit down and just do a show with a bunch of other gate kids because we all have missing time. We all
Wow.
have vague descriptors of the kind of tests that they had us do. I remember what in my head looked like tarot cards, but I've been told that there are a couple of different things, a whole bunch of different cognitive shit. I really do
Wow.
think they were looking for kids that had like um I don't know, aptitude or potential towards uh some supernatural abilities or psychic abilities and stuff like that. Um
Wow.
I know Shelly, one of our producers here, has some of those abilities and was like heavily tested. The sound stuff that they did to you in those things was super weird. The auditory
Wow.
part of your
They're trying to
testing.
put you in Stranger Things program or something, right?
I mean, it
Project
kind
Montauk
of,
type stuff.
yeah, it kind of seems like it was a clearinghouse for that sort of thing. Yeah, ESP cards. Um
Wow.
all that kind of shit was just, I mean, that was it was just part of it. Sometimes we were in school, sometimes we got taken to a fucking building to go do it. Half the time you couldn't see out of any of the windows. If there were windows in the room you were doing the testing in, like it was just
Wow.
weird. It was weird. And then
I would
you'd go
definitely be
home.
interested to hear more about that if you do end up doing a show like that with other people who went through similar programs.
Yeah, we've been trying to round them up over the last few months. Sometimes you get people that are really willing to talk about it, and sometimes you get people that are like, I don't know, man, I forgot all that. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Well, I got to get going just a second, brother. I have another interview to jump to, but I want to just say this as before I head out, that if anybody does have experience with Bethany Christian Services, whether positive or negative, please do reach out to me or Steve, because I will say the mothers who've spoke to me, they have all said, if anybody reaches out to you and needs somebody to speak to, who, they just need a friend or someone to talk to, these mothers want to make themselves available, of course, privately. They're not going to come out more public. Charity, you can find her on her TikTok channel. But if you do know anything about this, you heard anything about it, you have a friend or a family member, I'm interested to hear your story. We're trying to raise awareness about this, and I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about it, brother.
Heck yeah, and come back in a week or two and we can catch up on the fluoride trial stuff too.
Yeah, let's do that. Hopefully we'll have a ruling very soon, because it's been 6 months almost now, so
It has been.
we're still waiting, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but yeah, I'm definitely down to come back and talk about it, brother.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, Derrick, please direct people to all of the spots that you would like to direct them to. And thank you again for your time. It's always great to chat with you.
You're very welcome, brother. You can find my articles on Bethany Christian Services at thelastamericanvagabond.com under my author page. And you can find video breakdowns of these articles as well as the rest of my content at theconsciousresistance.com. Appreciate it, man.
Hell yeah, brother. Thank you again. Derrick Broze, everybody. And I think that's gonna do it for the day. But yeah, absolutely. When as soon as there is a conclusion to that fluoride trial thing, or even if there's not, just to have an update, we'll have Derrick come back through in a week or so. And that's gonna do it for the show. Wanted to thank Rachel for the PayPal early this morning. A couple of super rays came in. Greg Walker asked Slim if the Beef Initiative has any rainbow LGBTQCIA beef. Probably not. That's how we got the vegans on board. Queer friendly beef. Yeah, maybe. Well, I'll run and buy them next time, Greg. Sorry I didn't see this earlier. I see irony says the cats eating birds story reminds me when the Catholic Church killed all the cats for being demons who spread the Black Plague. The cats were actually eating the plague rats, so the plague spread faster. Yeah, it's Mao killing the sparrows too. Yeah, yeah, lots of bad ideas. Lots of bad ideas. Thanks to everybody for pulling up and watching. It is a value for value show here. If you like what we're doing, we don't get outside money from anyone for anything. It's you, the individual who enjoys the show, that contributes whatever you can or whatever you think is cool in terms of time, talent, and treasure. All the direct donate links are in the description. Those are critical. Make clips, get them out there, proliferate them, all of that kind of stuff. I'll be on Critical Hour in about 2 hours. And then, excuse me, I think I'm going to be doing a show with Nature Boy later tonight. I'll let you guys know about all of that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that'll do it. You guys rock. Bunch of good people coming up next week. More Third Eye Carnival artists, some of the speakers, and also the director and writer for the Jones Plantation film, Drew Treglia, and Larkin Rose, the Larkin Rose, gonna be on the show next Thursday. So looking forward to that conversation as well. That'll be a banger. Y'all kick ass. Love the hell out of you. See you very, very soon. I'll drop a link in the Telegram group for the Critical Hour spot, t.me/AM Wake Up. Get there. Love you guys. Good luck to us all.
Go back to bed, America. Your government has figured out how it all transpired. Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control again. Here's American Gladiators. Watch this. Shut up. Go back to bed, America. Here's American Gladiators. Here is 56 channels of it. Watch these pituitary retards bang their fucking skulls together and congratulate you on living in the land of freedom. Here you go, America. You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.